Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, let's hop right into demos. Anybody chomping at the bit to share what they worked on this week?
We can go first.
Cool. Thanks, Anna. So I liked what Yenli put in there about just let's focus on the functionalities for the like kind of just step through the acceptance criteria and go from there.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So what we had this week, when the user does not already have a token in local storage on the home screen, a simple form is displayed that allows the user to enter a token. So this is the form we added so the user can join an existing list. Entering the token and hitting submit saves the token to local storage, effectively giving them joint control of the list. So I'm going to use list because we know that's already in the Firebase. And yeah, it's saved to local storage and it gives us access to the list. Get rid of this. On submit, show an error if the token does not exist. So we just add in. It gives us the error message because it wasn't found. And if they get an error message, allow them to try again or create a new list. So once the user clicks OK, they're still in the home screen where they get to add a new list or try again joining an existing list. So those were the acceptance criteria. And I just wanted to highlight how we thought this was a little bit harder than it looked, getting the input right. We're still trying to adjust that because there was more to think about than it first seemed. And aside from doing this work with the input values, so we tried to check for an empty values and show an error message if the user hadn't typed anything, but there were other cases we still had to address. And then we the last commit in our pull request was just changing the trim down here. It happens once we try to check for the input value in the database collection. So so it happens here if the user adds extra spaces. Oh, stop doing that. Okay. It still works even if there are extra spaces. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. That was our work this week.
It's really great that you thought about all the different edge cases, and you know, there's something to be said for code-based testing, which, you know, of course we're not addressing in this project, but just empirically testing it as well. So hats off to the team for doing that. Anybody else have any questions on the demo?
So it's awesome that you got the normalization for the input to check, but does that mean we'll need to have the database storing the token with no spaces? Which, I mean, I think we can do pretty easily, but I just want to make sure that's the flow that we're thinking about. Is it checking against a no space? Like if she's trimming it down?
The trim is only checking the front and back. It's not checking for the spaces in between each word.
Okay.
So I think whatever normalizing, like we have to use the same criteria.
Right.
I think that this makes sense. I mean, having one space between seems reasonable to me. I guess there's like, what would you want to happen in the case of somebody accidentally putting two spaces between? I mean, potentially, I guess you could have some logic to bring down any combination of spaces between two words down to one space, potentially to make it a bit more user-friendly, because somebody would experience an error, right? In that case, if they accidentally hit two spaces. So, I mean, there's like optimization that could be had here, but I think just trimming, I think for the acceptance criteria, I'm happy with just trimming off the front and the back.
Okay.
I don't know, anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think one way to eliminate potential, spacing errors between words is to just send the 3-word token as a single string without spaces to the database, and that way you can check against it.
Yeah, I mean that could certainly be an optimization. I guess you need to think about edge cases there too. Like how do you if you send it to the server, then how do you determine where the start and end of a word is?
Yeah, since they are kind of goofy words sometimes that we're pulling from to create the token.
I'm not, maybe I don't understand the question. So I'm imagining in the back end, you're looking at Firestore, you've got a bunch of tokens, all one string, but they're 3 words. We've used, some logic. I would suggest regex to just normalize that input going into into where we send the props.token. And then, so when the database receives it, it's already one condensed, formatted word, no punctuation, no spaces. And then, so you have that to check against whatever logic you use to check for the token when you have the user at, right there, what Anna just demonstrated. You can just, again, normalize that input to one condensed, no punctuation, no spaces string.
Yeah, I
So the user's putting in anything they want, essentially, as long as it contains those 3 words correctly in that order.
You are losing some data there though, because I mean, I know this might seem a bit pedantic, but what if there's 2 3-word combinations that end up in the same string because of letters, and you've gone and concatenated them, so then you have what essentially is a collision between 2 tokens, because you've gotten rid of, like, there's what's the meaning in that 3-word. It's not just that it's a continuous string of letters, it's that it's 3 unique words, and you're getting rid of that, like, resolution. Not likely, but it's certainly something to consider.
Because like you could have like the word strawberry be the first word in a token, but then you could also have the word berry floating around somewhere and the word straw floating around somewhere. So then if you had strawberry whatever versus strawberry something something, that could make it a little, is that kind of what you're saying?
Myself, yeah. I'm saying that, yeah, you're just in like semantics, you're losing data because you're no longer dealing with unique words. Again, not likely, but it's just something to consider, the kind of like assumptions. So it is, I agree with James that it's like easier, certainly, like code wise, and it potentially kills some paths, some logical paths of like, how do we handle the spaces? How do we trim down to one space within the spaces? Like, you're getting rid of some complications, which is super desirable. But then you also have to just make sure you're not oversimplifying and losing meaning. Again, in our example, pretty minor, but if you started allowing people to define their own 3-word strings, then you could potentially have collisions there. Let's move on to the next demo though. Thanks everybody for the input. This kind of discussion is super helpful, so thanks for hopping in there, James. But yeah, James, Jessica, either one of you all want to show off your work this week?
Yeah, I mean, James, I can do the quick little demo, and if you'd like to, I think you'd be able to talk better about some of the issues, etc. That's cool.
Yeah, you can show. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that.
All right. Thanks. All right, cool. All right, so here we go. When it comes to what we were working on today, or this past week, we want users to be alerted if they're entering an item that's already existing on the list, so duplicates can be avoided. So first off, show an error if the user tries to submit a new item that has the exact same name as an existing item. So here I already have a list created with a token hanging out here. And so if we have the word coffee, that's already on there, and then I try to add it again, we get an alert letting us know that coffee does already exist in the list. We also want to show an error if the user tries to submit a new item that has the same name where the capitalization has been normalized and punctuation has been removed. Kind of already saw that with that first one here because coffee was capitalized. But also in conjunction with our third criteria, user's original input should be what's saved into the database. I'd already entered garbanzo beans, but used a different character for there, so it was able to be entered. Later, I added garbanzo beans just normalized. So if I go ahead and we have something like coffee beans that has a bunch of exclamation points, if I go to add like that, we will still get a alert saying that it's already in there. If I added some exclamation points in the center, it's going to show what our input is, but ultimately letting us know coffee beans are already in the list. And I believe that is all of the criteria that we were needing to show this week. Then James, if you want to chat about any of the details.
Sure. I just realized in that moment that we probably should display to the user what's in the database already. So what you just saw was when you said coffee, right? That's what the input was, but we need to have a function that checks against and stores what's in the database, so that that would be confusing to me, like, because if coffee beans with exclamation points in the middle of it is not in the database, you see what I'm saying? So something we got fixed. Other than that, no, I think you did a great job demonstrating. The only challenging part for us on the code side, I think more than anything, was probably thinking through how to normalize the input. And we used, some regex, and we had fun going back and forth on figuring out what worked and what didn't work. I took Yenli's suggestion to create a helper function that we could pass through. And like I think I said in Slack, I don't know if you saw, this is the same helper function, but I think that's part of why we had it structured differently with a little bit of a different regex logic, but I don't remember why that was now, to be honest. And like I was saying just now, we should probably have something here that's displaying what's in the database, not what item in is the input from the user. We got a chat here. I think it was for spaces. Yeah, I think you're right. So we left the spaces so that it looks nice on their end. I agree with that. Okay. And the only thing that I added since our last talk is I realized that, Jessica, when we were pairing, we didn't check for an empty. So if we have nothing there, I just use one of the suite alert different properties to display this nice warning instead. So now we have that. That's something that we didn't get to talk about. So that's the only thing maybe that's not demonstrated.
That's great.
Yeah. But that's pushed up, and you should be able to do that on your end too.
Just super nice refinement.
Other than that, I think. Oh, you know what I did add? I realized that is I found it when you showed me how to do this. And before, without this line here on line 65, I have I just pull down the props.token, and if it doesn't exist, I tell our here we go, refresh, it's going to push us back home. I realized when we were deleting that local storage, I was still seeing the add item, which we don't want to let the user do, obviously.
Right.
Okay.
No, that's a good. Cool.
But I got both of those things from the other team. So good job, other team, because both the input check for an empty string and this redirect. I'm glad I saw that, because that's what inspired me to get those on ours.
Nice.
All right.
So you're saying if there's that line 65 is if there is no token, push back to the root. Otherwise, null.
Is that the best way to do that?
I mean, it certainly works. I'm just kind of rationalizing through like what the null path is here. You're just saying just no op this function just kind of.
Well, it's in a render, and I don't want to. I don't know. I just want to make sure that if there's a is a token, that nothing's being rendered. Like I don't know if an empty string or whatever would. I'm not sure how that behaves, so I just did null.
For the redirect, I think if the redirect was added in, how that was added in, that should account for that. So you shouldn't have to do the push. Because if you refresh it, what happens is it loads the whole thing again, and if it catches that there's no token, it should redirect to the home page.
Okay. I'm gonna verify what you're saying.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
I'm just gonna verify what you're saying with. I'm just gonna clear this and. Nope, I'm still getting my form. The only thing I'm not getting.
Can you share your screen?
Yep, for sure. All right. So let's go back home. I've commented out that line, and I've got a token here. Remy Lawick, clear. No token. Refresh. Wait a minute. But I just did it and it didn't work. Okay, fine. Because you're saying that's happening at the home screen level or the app.js level, is that what you're saying? Okay. I don't know why, but it worked. I promise you, like, that's why I put it in, because I was like, wait a minute, why am I still seeing this? But I don't know. Okay.
I think, is that if you're at localhost 3000 / add item,
maybe,
and then you try to do the refresh, that's where
yeah, there it is. There it is.
But if you're at / list, then it will.
Right.
This is because we are explicitly loading the add item path, but we do have a control at the app.js level, don't we, to check that token, like Lauren was saying? So yeah,
Oh, it's not there for the add item. See the redirect isn't there.
Okay.
So you would want to
just do the same thing. Okay. Okay, I can do that. I can fix that. So just mimic what we see here. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I would answer that question, and kind of like anything where you're thinking about when you're implementing something in a child component, it's like, well, does the whole app do all the children benefit from this? And it's like, well, yeah, at any point in the app you want to be able to go back up. So instead of duplicating it potentially in two places, just step it up to the parent level, which it already is there. We just need to adjust it. So right now are we duplicating the check token? So can we do that higher up in the tree? Can we make that
I see. I wouldn't know how to do that because I'm inside a switch and I've never done that before. I don't know.
And it's not something we need to address right now, but we can turn back to it as a refinement later on.
Okay, good.
Sounds great.
All right.
Well, thanks for the demo and the explanation, and for the code live code jamming. That was great.
Yeah. Okay. I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, let's hop into the session today on pair programming. I'll share my screen. One moment. All right. Does everybody see my full screen?
Yep.
All right. Sounds good. So we'll just start from the basics, even though I'm sure we all have a concept of what pair programming is. It's just the concept of pairing two people sitting in front of a keyboard and taking turns writing code. Where I actually like oftentimes kind of have beginner's mindset about this because I've not done a lot of pair programming just due to like work environments and the projects I've done. So I always, whenever I do pair programming, I really like this model of thinking of it like the driver and the navigator, because kind of just adding a little bit of formalized structure to it helps time box, and then it also helps you kind of like get into the headspace of one of these positions, because I think we all have natural predispositions to being the driver or the navigator. The driver being the person who's actually on the keyboard and is the person responsible for writing the code. And a really important part of that is kind of verbalizing. So when you're because you have everything in your head, it often helps to be like, okay, right now I'm in the add item component, but I think that we're going to have to do this route, this route change for both the list and the add item. So I'm going to go over and write this in the app.js. And so by verbalizing your thought process, the other person, looking at the navigator description, can pay close attention to the code that the driver's writing, offering guidance, suggestions, and help you kind of discover and be a sounding board. So maybe if James was my navigator, he would say, ooh, like, but I tried that, and maybe we should think about blah, 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 or talking about trimming strings or whatever. And the idea is to create this kind of like open dialogue. And it's super, super helpful to see each other as peers. It's not like somebody is the supervisor, kind of commanding the driver or trying to challenge the driver. The idea is that you're peers. We're trying to make this like a psychologically safe experience, because it's nerve-wracking. Like, oh gosh, what if I type the wrong thing? Or whenever somebody's looking over your shoulder, it's I'm more prone to making keyboard mistakes. So trying to really shave off some of that stress by having this formalized kind of driver and navigator experience. And then the other thing is to not let somebody dominate. And that's kind of what we're getting with this pairing remotely, is two developers hop on a video or screen share. There's a few different ways to do this. We'll get into that. The driver usually shares their screen on Zoom or whatever, and then codes, and then the navigator can provide feedback and based on watching that screen. And then the idea is that every so often you want to push that code up, and the navigator can pull that down locally. There's a bunch of different ways to do that. Git is obviously the easiest way to do it, and then swap roles. So the idea is to keep it balanced. So if you're going to have a pair session for, I don't know, an hour and change, like maybe do it like a 15-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute, 20-minute, just try to formalize it and keep a balance so that you're not accidentally, it's good practice for both of you to be on both sides of that. And like I was alluding to, like having the beginner's mindset, like there's no way, I mean, code is this like crazy funnel. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and you need to have that beginner's mindset. And to kind of go back to that like fear and nobody knows everything, it's easy to be nervous about pair programming. But if both people are like super humble, come into it with a good laugh, and have a beginner's mindset, it goes a lot easier. It takes the stress off, and it's one of those things you got to practice. It's a muscle that you need to use regularly. And big thing on the second bullet, it's not about teaching or mentorship. Like, again, the psychological safety, this isn't, if the one person or the other, usually, I don't know, the navigator starts being kind of prescriptive, then it changes the power dynamic, and you're not able to, maybe it shuts one person down and you're not contributing as equals. So the idea is to keep it loose, keep it easy, switch roles, and really try to assume positive intent and discover solutions together. Let's see. Yeah, that's kind of reiterating navigators ask, don't tell, drivers seek agreement before proceeding. So it's similarly to navigators not dominating and saying do this or challenging. The drivers also need to make sure that you're communicating your intent, and so that by the time your fingers hit the keys and actually add some code, that you're not just kind of a one person show, running ahead without the agreement of whoever's navigating. It should be a consensus-based process. And so this is what I like this part best is how does this align? Like, what's your experience? Because some of y'all have done boot camps and of various types, or online courses or apprenticeships. And I just love to hear, because there's so many different flavors of pair programming. Does anybody want to chime in about what their experiences have been? Well, let's just go down the list. I mean, Jessica, what's your experience with pair programming?
Before Collab Lab, we did do pair programming in the boot camp I was in. I think I maybe shared this before, that it was good because I feel like we did kind of have the driver navigator thing, and people would kind of, if someone suggested something, you tried it just to see what would happen, even if you thought you knew what would happen. And so there was some really good back and forth like that. The one thing that, at least from my perspective, was I felt like sometimes the pair programming sessions were really rushed because it was within a boot camp setting and we had 5,000 other things to do that day. And so there was kind of this, yeah, we're pair programming, but we need to get this done. So it could easily shift the power dynamic just because you had so many things to do in such a short amount of time. So yeah, I think a lot of what you said is very similar to what we were taught and what we kind of did, but it wasn't the perfect atmosphere.
When push came to shove, it didn't always go smoothly. Yeah. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't feel like it was ever like this butting of heads or anything like that. It was just more if one person, because I tend to sit back much more easily than speaking out. And so it was very easy for it to just kind of be a bowled over experience. So, but I also needed to learn to speak up more.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Anna, what's your experience with pair programming?
The only chance I had to do it before Collab Lab was with a study group. I joined, it's just some girls from Europe that I met over Twitter, and we're reading the You Don't Know JavaScript books, and we try to do pair programming when we have the exercise part of the book. So that's my only experience. At work, my previous job, we didn't do that. Like my previous boss was not a firm believer in pair programming, so that never happened. And in my current job, I'm trying to bring it up, but it's been a little difficult. Like, especially this past week, I joined a new project and I'm just begging someone to pair program with me, but I'm not having a whole lot of luck so far. So I'm very glad I have Collab Labs, so I get to work with other people. It makes things less lonely.
And that kind of brings me to a question of, you mentioned this group on Twitter. That's super awesome. I saw something actually by Stacy. She retweeted something in the last day talking about how instead of firing off 100 applications into the void, it's that they, this person who was doing the original tweet was like, I highly recommend getting on Twitter and networking. That is way more valuable. So it's cool to hear.
That's my boy Sam Sycamore. He's in my little community that we built for ourselves. I love him. He lives in the woods and he poops in a bucket and he and I love him so much. Yeah, he said that he got a lot of traction with that tweet. Yeah. We were talking about that though.
Oh, that's sweet. So Anna, like with that group, how do you pair programming? This kind of, we're getting ahead a bit here, but one thing I'm curious about is to inject is, we talked about the sharing the screen and pulling down the code, but I think there are a lot of different tools. Do you do what's your particular way of doing it, Anna?
Since we're just doing exercises, like we don't even bring GitHub into it. We just do like coding sandbox, and we just take turns. One person types, the other one talks through it, and we try to go through things together. But I mean, It's just exercises. It's never been like a full project, but it's been very helpful.
Is the sandbox, is it like an online website though, where it's duplicating on both sides?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's super great.
I think that's Code Sandbox. Code Sandbox. Is it .io or .com? It's a really good one to practice with other people because you don't have to deal with setup.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
nice.
the
I think
idea.
I've seen interviewers use this in the past. There's a few different platforms. I wasn't sure if we were referring to like Code Sandbox, the general term, but it's codesandbox.io.
I think so. I can grab the URL.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, hopping down. James, what's your experience?
So I mentioned, recently that just now that I have a little community group. It's about, I don't know, about probably like 30 people that were on a Slack together. We just randomly found each other on Twitter. And I would say about half of those people are really engaged, and we pair all the time on things, and I love it. It's the only way I love to really code. It's like the lifeblood of like what I do. But at Flatiron, we did a lot of pairing, and it wasn't, structured into the program. I think most boot camps probably do, but I think that in terms of my own pairing style, when I was in boot camp, I was very timid and very unassured of myself. So I just kind of watched a lot, and then when I did have to, be the person driving, I felt like a lot of pressure and stuff. But since then, being around, these people that I just call my friends, I think I've kind of really come into my own a little bit more. I think I've almost maybe gone the other way now. Maybe like you guys can. I sometimes feel like I over, drive or you know what I mean. I maybe I take control too much. I need to probably learn how to pull back a little bit more and let other people do things. But I mean, for me though, it's my favorite way to code. So.
Yeah, that self-awareness is huge. Being able to recognize when you're kind of on one side of the equation or the other unbalanced, because it's the first step to being able to kind of self-correct on that and really lift up your peers. So hats off to that. And Zenzi, you've had like a varied experience because you've been boot camp, and then you had the apprenticeship, and you've dealt with like quite a few languages and I bet different communities. So I'm curious, like if you've seen a particular style of pair programming, or if that was something that was done in your apprenticeship.
Yeah, I think all three had different approaches. So the boot camp relied on pair programming almost exclusively. So our boot camp was like a 12, 11-hour day, but the actual lessons were very short. And then you'd have 2 4-hour paired programming sessions, one in the AM, one in the PM. And you just were supposed to have a driver and 30-minute increments, push your code to GitHub and pull it. And we were just working on like mini projects, something that would take you a full day to complete, but you were expected to have it done by the end of the day for grading. And then with the apprenticeship, because I was being exposed to Java for the first time, the pairing was mostly about, I was more of observing. And sometimes if I was the driver, I was kind of just like the hands of a senior dev, and they were just telling me where to navigate to within the code base and what to write. That code base was huge. So it was a completely different experience because I wasn't necessarily expected to add a lot. Like it was a learning experience. But outside of those two things, I was part of a community called Code Buddies. They have a pretty active Slack channel, and you can go on there. It's for self-taught devs around the world. And you can go on there and just set up a room, and you can work on a project or work on a new language. I used it to pair on coding problems. Just to kind of get into whiteboarding mode. And we would use an online sandbox to just kind of work through leak code stuff.
Oh, nice. And you said whiteboarding, like, was there a particular way you whiteboarded, or is that part of that online sandbox?
Well, I had a similar experience. I had to interview for the apprenticeship, and that's how whiteboarding has been done as far as I know these days, is that they use one of these sandbox websites like Replit or sandbox.io or whatever, and they'll give you a problem and you have to code there, and it just runs within that environment. So I've just been trying to replicate that as often as I can with people who have more or less experience in JavaScript.
Nice. Thanks. And Laura and Yunli, do y'all have any kind of personal experiences that you'd like to share with the crew?
I think mine were pretty similar to what everyone mentioned. Yeah, at Flatiron, they kind of drove in the driver navigator. But it was the one tool I have liked in the past is something called, I haven't used it in a little while, Live Share. It's a code plugin.
I was just about to show that because I learned about it in the last cohort, but then even this week I learned some new functionality that I didn't know existed. And so for VS Code folks, it's a lot of it's a lot of fun. What I'll just kind of live demo, something will break, but it'll be fun. There's this kind of let's see. So down at the bottom here, I can make my editor a little bigger. But there's this, I have too many plugins, so sorry if it's a bit cluttered, but there's this live share, and it just, you click on it and it just starts this collaboration session. So it's reaching out to a server, automatically copies it. And then when you go and share that with somebody, there's this kind of, if I collapse this and then side navigation, and sorry, mine's on the right, not on the left, so it might look a little weird. But you can invite participants by sharing that link, and even more, it's kind of like a Google Doc where you can just see people's cursors with their names hopping around. And so it's, you know, like any kind of code editor. But the thing that I really loved is, you see the shared servers bit. I think I have two because I accidentally started. I have a TCL 23. I have another window open somewhere on my computer, but it's kind of fun when you start the development server in the terminal here. It actually shares that. And so you can, instead of having to do that whole like push up, if you're going to switch roles, you can just stay right in the editor, because you can, if you go to, it maps the local host 3000. So that port over to your pairs. So if this is on my system and you loaded up this link, I mean, heck, if somebody wants to hop in here, if I can find you all. Okay, can't find the chat right now. But you would be able to go to that address locally, even if you're not running the development server. You haven't done npm start, but it ports my version over to you, so you can operate off the same code, getting rid of any kind of potential oh, you don't have that commit, or oh, I didn't push this up, so you don't have that. I thought that was really cool and new to me, so I learned a thing. Somebody else, and then I think there's chat, and you can start audio. Of course, you could pair it with Zoom or whatever. But I like that a lot.
The tiniest recommendation, if you use that, I have autosave on and I love it, but I really, not really, but ticked my friend off when we were using it because he didn't. And what that meant is every time I was typing, our shared server would like error out. So if because as you're messing it up, then obviously it's, so anyway, if you're sharing, maybe switch from the beloved autosave just for that moment.
Oh, that's a really good tip. And for anybody who, I'll just share for one more second, if you go into your preferences, you can see your autosave preferences here. There's a few different, you can either do it in this kind of editor or up here. Sometimes you'll be on websites that, for a plugin or some tutorial, or if you have a certain work config, there'll be like a particular setting that might be hard to find in here, but they'll give you some JSON. And so you can actually click this little page over, and it kind of like goes to the backside of your settings. So you can actually see, like here I've got like for Jira, Zapier, for file formatting. So you can like say for JSON, use this plugin. And so there's a lot of kind of like you can get into the nuts and bolts. And so you can even say for a specific language, let's see if I've got like Python lint on save. So like I've made it so like anytime I save, it runs the linter and checks it. So that's a little bit nitty gritty. But so if you're in settings and you find that you're just not finding, but you've been on a website and they say, oh, plug this setting in, you can just go straight into the nuts and bolts of it and modify it, so you can adjust when it saves, etc. But yeah, so just kind of I'll share this link in the channel, but there are some nice resources for learning more about pair programming. So if you have extra time and a cup of coffee, click around and learn. But I just say the big focus is, it's a muscle you have to flex, and some environments aren't super great for pair programming. Like some offices, some companies just don't do it, but I'd say definitely try to give it a shot as much as possible, because like what's the worst thing that happens? You learn something. There's no way that you can kind of like combine your powers. So it's like, there's no way I'd know everything, and maybe I'd be on a pair programming session with Anna and she's like, yeah, I did this. And actually you can use, you could use a ternary in this case because it would be more efficient, or I've seen a performance gain, or I read this blog post, and you're getting a wealth of knowledge from every person that you pair with. And so there's nothing but things to be gained. And on that, I think we should look at our next week issues. Do you want to take over from me, Emily?
Sure.
Thanks.
Let me see. Oops, checking my speed test. Okay, so this coming week's issues. So issue 7 is, as a user, I want to see a welcoming prompt to add my first item if my list is empty, to help me get oriented to how the app works. When you have no items on the list, you want to show a prompt. And right here is, it could be a button, it could be some wording. It's up to you to decide. And then they can add their first item. So I think for this one, when we mentioned earlier that the token is only being saved in local storage and it doesn't save in the Firebase. So maybe as part of this issue to handle that, to take care of consolidating and making sure that we don't lose the token and that it gets saved. Yeah. So any questions on this issue? To me, it seems simple, but I don't want to say it's simple. Cool. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. So this one is, as a user, I want to mark an item on my shopping list as purchased so that you can learn how often you buy the different items. So the acceptance criteria is when you tap on the checkbox. Yeah, so here it requires adding a checkbox. So when someone checks it, then the item is listed as purchased. So it should update the purchase field in your database. And I think it's, we can talk about or how that can be saved. And I think it really depends on the team. And items should be shown as checked for 24 hours after the purchase is made. We assume that the user does not need to buy the item again for at least 1 day. And I think this assumption is put in there to make this task easier, because like you can check and check and there's a lot more logic around it to have to build it. And it can get really complicated. So I definitely think start with this and see how it goes. Yeah. Any questions for this one?
I did notice that there's, we have a wireframe to kind of guide. I shared the link with you. Maybe since you're driving there, you could share that with the crew. It's in your Slack, I think. Or I can put it in the chat here even. Oh, there. Oh, here. I will post it right in the chat there. Sorry, I sent it to your Slack,
Okay.
but now it's in the chat.
Okay.
So the reason I brought this up is just it gives you a little hint of labeling with a for attribute, and that's using and also using ARIA labels, and that's just one focus. You know, we're not focusing on CSS here, but at least not yet. That's coming in the future. But we do want to focus on accessibility because that's super, super important for, you know, whether it's screen readers of various types. But so if you're not familiar with ARIA labels, we can give it a Google. It's not too hard. You're basically just giving you're giving alternate text for a screen reader to read out to somebody who's has some kind of impairment.
Mhm. Yeah, so I also want to, because we're showing this wireframe, it's a lot of other functionality that we're not building for this issue. So I just want to highlight that it's just building this part with the checkboxes so that it's more focused and you wouldn't get overwhelmed. So the other part that I think we have forgotten to mention that you could do, and this is probably really common, is you're able to add comments to each issue as you're working, right? So if you have questions, clarifying questions, sometimes when we're going over this, you don't think of it until you start to dive in and then realize like, oh, right, this, I'm not sure I understood this part, or, you know, you have questions, you can definitely write it in here, or, oh, I can't, oh. But here, just in terms of like, well, here's a wireframe, you know, adding some comments. And this also adds to the conversations we're having as we're building things, right? There's conversations in the PR. There's also sometimes good to ask clarifying questions in the issue itself. And, you know, right now we're working in GitHub, but, you know, in Jira and all that stuff, it's also a common practice to do. Let's see. Any questions on this one? Because I think this one, the way the acceptance criteria is written, it could be a little confusing.
Maybe it doesn't apply to us yet. Maybe I'm thinking about this incorrectly, but I'm assuming that when you check it, you're going to update the database. But I thought you couldn't. I thought maybe I heard this somewhere else, or maybe I heard it here. But Firestore, I didn't think has a credibility. Does it have create read, or is it? How does it update an item that exists?
So this is where you have to go to Firebase, find a particular item, and I don't remember exactly the action for it. So with Firebase, you should be able to create, add, or update.
Okay.
I don't remember it, but you can find a particular item, update that.
But
that
it is
attribute.
possible.
Yes. Yes.
It's updating and current. It's like it's going to change the property of a current existing entry in the database.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like
So it would
it's not
be,
okay. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I forgot the names that were used, but let's see. Let's go back.
Yeah, I mean, updating a record is like a typical CRUD thing. So there certainly is. I mean, we'll have to look at the API docs, but it's certainly in there.
Mm-hmm. So in your create items, there were 3 things, right? Is that? I wanted to bring it back up. Here, so item name, purchase frequency, and last purchase. So when you had created this, the last purchase was null. So when you click on the checkbox, it should look for the item with this name, and then last purchase should update. So I think there's different ways that you can implement this and how you keep track of last purchase. So it could be a count, or it could be a date, because I think future issue is when we have to use this value to estimate when you would need it again.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, something to think about. So this week's pairing is, I think, Zenzi and Jessica, and then is Anna and James. So any preferences to which issue you want to work on?
Anna, do you want to tackle some updating database stuff?
Sure.
Sounds fun.
Cool. And Jessica and Zenzi, are you okay with taking the other one? Oops. Didn't mean to do that. I can update that later. I will. Yeah, so I'll take care of that later. So then I think the other thing that we want to ask, just feedback as in how many hours all of you are spending, just to make sure that you're not spending way too much time. And if you are spending extra time, it's more of like you have that free time, you wanted to do the refactoring. Like, you know, the recommendations that I put there, I want to make sure to put it out there. Like, it's, if you want to refactor, good, but if you don't have the time, it's okay. Like, you don't need to do all that, only if you have the time and capacity. So I kind of want to go through and see how much time everybody is spending and whether your workload is too much, because we want to make sure that we're helping you with time management, how to decide on what to work on versus doing too much. Then we don't want you to burn out and affect like other parts of your life, right? Anybody want to share first?
For me, I admittedly spend probably more than the work, suggested 5 hours, but I just do it because I can, and I have fun doing it. I try really hard not to overstep the whole don't do anything without my partner type thing. There are a few times like where I'll like reach out to her on Slack, hey, I noticed something. Can I, do you agree? Are you happy with that? And then let's move it up or whatever. But I probably spend closer to 10 hours a week, and some of the time that's not even coding, it's just reading through things, reading through my own code and trying to make sure I fully understand it, because that's where I'm still at sometimes with my own development, is just making sure I fully understand every line of the code. And I'll go through I'll spend a lot of time in the other person's PR or in their code base, just checking out what they're doing to understand. So
that's great. Yeah, that's really great when you have the time. It helps your learning.
10 is absolutely more close to reality, because if you think about the way the workflow goes, we have to meet with our pair on Monday or Tuesday in order to be ready for Wednesday. So you're going to spend 2+ hours with your pair. And in order to be prepared to meet with your pair, you're probably doing a little research beforehand. So that might take an hour. So that's 3 hours before you've even met for the hour of office hours. So you're at 5 hours by midweek. And that does not include the refactoring and reviewing other people's code or the Sunday meeting.
I agree with the timeline that Zenzi gave.
And Anna?
Yeah, I'm trying to spend the greatest amount of time I possibly can, because I'm really enjoying this and it's really helpful. But when it gets like to midweek, then I'm really pressed for time and I have a lot of other things going on. So I try to focus on at least getting these hours in the beginning of the week, so that I know that, I'll have the time to pair program and at least have something up.
Any thoughts, Sky, Lauren?
Oh, sorry, I was just double checking with Sky, but just so you guys know, if your week is bad, the office hours are optional. It's just like extra support. So if you are reaching your limit and you feel like you need to do other things, please, we're not offended if you can't.
Yeah, I always thought about it like kind of like professors, like office hours or something. Like they publish it in the rubric. They say, "Hey, I'll be available on these hours," and some days nobody shows up. Some days, one group will. Some days all the groups will. Sometimes you can pop in and with a quick question. You're not obliged to stay for the whole hour. So, yeah. I mean, if you have your acceptance criteria and you're clear on what you need to do, and you don't have any clarifying questions or don't want any support with the code, then have your time for free.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we're here to help and support you. So, it's just access to help. So you don't have to. Well, cool. I think that's all I have in terms of issues. Is there any concerns, questions?
I have something that's been on my mind. I've been thinking a lot, a lot of these issues with like some of the things in terms of like what do we show to the user and confirmation stuff, and we've talked a little bit, I think, about it in our midweek checkup about what's the best way to structure the list and the add item. And so I kind of like, and that wireframe that Sky just showed is kind of similar to something I sketched up one on Excalidraw. And I just wanted to get y'all's feedback because I think it's probably getting close to time where we want to be on the same page about this, right? Like, or is it not yet?
I think, see, I want to encourage ideas, right? So if you have ideas and you're sketching something, I definitely recommend sharing it on Slack, and we can chime in terms of asynchronously.
Ooh.
When people have time, we'll start commenting, and it could be a thread that can keep going up until the point when we address the thread, right? Like I like for this to be about having conversations, and whatever comes to mind, let's have it.
Okay. You can definitely do that. I'm not sure I don't know how to share a Excalidraw file, but maybe I can.
You can save, take a screenshot or save it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we could start a thread of ideas. Like what I really love this past week is, Jessica reaching out and saying, hey, we're thinking of using the alert. What do y'all think? And it's
right.
Everybody's jumping in and answering. And I love that. Like, let's do that as a team.
Okay.
Good show. Random thought I just wanted to make about the checkbox issue and updating is if it's not immediately apparent, if you look at the shape of our objects, we already have a particular attribute on the model that we're not using that is ideal for this. Because if you're thinking about how am I going to track that it's been purchased or not, you could think of a variety of things. You could think, oh, well, maybe a Boolean. You purchased yes, no, but then you think about our functionality of like how often the thing should be purchased. Well, maybe there's going to be some logic there related to like the time that it was purchased. And so looking at the model, we already have an attribute and we're not setting. So before going and hopping into implementation, get your head in kind of the architecture space and be like, what's the shape of our object and how might we use this later, and give it a little thought down that line. And if you have any questions, we can chat in Slack, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Oh, one last thing. Lauren, what's your kitty's name?
I have two. They are named after Game of Thrones characters. This one is Tyrion because when he was a baby, he looked like a little lion. Now he's huge, but he's also like very sweet, but also very naughty. So, yeah. There you go.
Oh, Game of Thrones. I love that. I love that show. Not the last season, too.
Yeah, bad last season, but.
Okay, that was great. So hope everybody has a good rest of the weekend, and see you on Slack.
One really quick thing. Is there a plan for merging?
Yeah, what's the plan, team, pairs? How comfortable do you feel?
I think it would make more sense for local storage people to push first, I think, and then duplicate people, us, try to fix those. I think our changes are much bigger. I think.
I'm cool with that setup. If the other team or if the other pair is.
Yeah, sure. I'll merge ours as soon as the call is done.
Okay.
And I'll let you all know over Slack.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Then James, one of us, or we can pair it up and
I'd be happy to pair. That way we can kind of experience that together. I have time, so
great. I can too.
Cool.
Yeah, help each other with the merge conflict. This is definitely the space to like
Right.
be uncomfortable together.
Yeah, because I'm not super comfortable with it. Maybe so that way, maybe she can, she'll be like, "Oh, did you see?" or whatever. So that'll be helpful.
Yeah, extra eyeballs are also pretty awesome to have.
Nice. Well, cool.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.